people ended up registering, so we will see. But we won't wait for them because we're the early birds, and we're going to get the worm. So, Adam, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, Anthony.
I'm Anthony from Twitter.
Yeah.
Suk, Francois, Greg, how's it going, guys? So, we have with us today Adam Lyttle, a founder that I'm also meeting for the very first time. He's got a very cool story that I'll let him tell. But right now he's building a service called Top Followers and just has like a slew of iPhone apps under his belt. I don't know if I think they're all iPhone apps. You can correct me if I'm wrong on that. I'll put links to his
Android
Twitter.
and iPhone.
Android and iPhone. Excellent. I'll post all those things in the chat for reference. The way this is going to work is Adam's going to tell us a bit about himself. Then we're going to have open Q&A. So anybody who wants to ask questions about any of the topics we bring up is welcome to do so. Just don't be a jerk. I'll kick you out. And if people are shy and don't have questions, I'll have plenty of my own. I think this whole thing is going to take about probably max an hour. I'll do a hard cut at the hour if it tries to go over that. So I think that's it for logistics. Adam, the floor is yours if you want to tell us a bit about your story.
All right. So my name's Adam. Last name is Lyttle. Everyone sort of thinks it's Little, but it's actually Lyttle.
My bad.
That's all right. Yeah, I've been a developer now since I was 19. So I'm 38 now. And started out my journey just making software, making shareware apps. I created apps in Visual Basic. And one of the apps I created was one called Windows Defender. And a bit later on, Microsoft came along and got the rights to the name of the software I built. And then that started my career in building software and building, I started a business after that, a service-based business, creating software, creating web apps, creating websites for clients. And for the next few years, I was just playing around with my own ideas, playing around with just creating things on the internet. One of the first things that I created, sorry, I got the alarm going off. One of the first things I created was Solitaire Craving, which is still online, and I sold that one it was Solitaire Craving, Mahjong Craving, and another one, Sudoku Craving. So they were sort of the Web 2.0 time where you could jump on and play a game. You can play every day a new game was generated. You jump on there and talk about the game with friends and try to sort of complete it in as fast as the time as you can. And I sold them, put together a house deposit. Got myself and the family a house. And then for the next 10 years to 15 years, I was working in a business making websites for clients. So a lot of web apps for hire, web design. And then around about 2018, 2019, the whole Squarespace, all those types of things, all those types of services came in, the no-code sort of solutions where business owners could jump in and create their own website. And pretty much overnight, my company that I had just collapsed. That sent me on a bit of I had a good income, a good business, and then pretty much overnight it all disappeared, but I still had all my liabilities, still had cars, house, all of the expenses, but no income to fix it up. And things got out of control, and I ended up finding myself with no cars, no house, but just a whole load of debt. And then we had the pandemic hit. And during that time, I decided I would teach myself app development. So I had, before that, so when my business collapsed, I ended up just setting up a lawn mowing round, doing mowing in my local area, and ended up doing pretty well with that. So I think I had at one stage about 100 clients on my books, and the current process, you talk to other people in the lawn mowing industry, and they were literally using a pen and paper to track their mowing rounds. So I'd have one piece of paper for even weeks, another piece of paper for odd weeks, and they'd put that in their truck, and then they would just run through the list. And I was thinking, well, there's got to be an easier way to do this. So I taught myself how to make apps, and I started making an app just to manage my own lawn mowing rounds. And then I ended up making more money from the app than I did from the lawn mowing round. So I sold the lawn mowing business and then focused on making apps. And I decided what I would do is, back in early 2020, I wanted to make an app per month, just for free, release it on the internet, see what happened. So every month I'd create a new app, put up on there, or after a while I sort of created my own boilerplate, so it got a bit easier to create a new app every month. And I learned the process in terms of what works, what doesn't work, how to do the app store optimization, what monetization methods work, those sorts of things. And I had one really successful hit straight off the bat. It was a simple app for there's a thing called angel numbers. So if you see repeating numbers like 111, 222, 333, there's people believe that there's some hidden meaning to them. So there was no real reference app for that. So I created a reference app. You load it up at the time and it would give you sort of the meaning of what those numbers meant. And it took off like wildfire, ended up catapulting to the top of the Google charts. It was one of the first apps that I created, so I didn't know what success or failure looked like, but I haven't been able to replicate that success since. And I ended up having quite a few buyers contact me to buy the app, and ended up selling the app pretty early on, and realizing that you can sort of build apps to generate a monthly recurring revenue, or you can cash out for 2, 3, 4, 5 years of revenue when you get bought. So I flipped my business model from sort of just creating apps that sort of did all right, generates a bit of revenue, and geared it more towards, when I create an app, there's the long-term plan of, okay, if we go down the path of exiting this app, how can I best implement the features and functionality to make sure that a buyer will make sure that the value proposition for a buyer is there, and also for the users as well. So my business model changed a bit from making my own apps to making apps for myself, for users, and for potential buyers. And last year, I decided that I'll be jumping onto Twitter and just documenting my process and my journey. And since then, it's been quite a whirlwind. So it's been fun. I think that brings us up to date.
Up to date. So for everyone that just joined, can you say your name for us once more so that we don't get it wrong?
It's Adam Lyttle.
We've got Adam Lyttle. He's open now for Q&A. You can just jump in. You can put a thumb up using the Q button on the left, or you can drop comments on the right. The floor is open. But I think my first question, maybe to kick us off while people are stewing in the brain, is, do you have any overall advice you've learned about growing on the App Store? It seems like you've had several apps that were big enough to sell, at least. So you must have learned something about what makes an app sellable, or what makes people want to use it in the first place.
I think what I've identified is I'm really good at getting an app to sort of 500 monthly recurring revenue. I think I struggle a little bit with scaling it a bit higher than that, but I can get it from $0 to 500. So my strategy has been just release lots of apps that generate $500 monthly recurring revenue. There's been a few exceptions to that where I have sort of generated a lot more than the 500, but that's generally been that's my basis for when I create a new app. I'm expecting in 6 to 12 months time that I'll be generating about 500 monthly recurring revenue. The strategy is I don't spend any money on marketing. So I don't advertise the app. It's all just app store optimization. The strategies that I've learned for optimizing it, there's quite a few different bits and pieces. The first place you would start is checking the keywords first. So using a service like App Figures, and then checking the keywords. And just like any normal sort of SEO work, you jump in there and you check to see which keywords have the good volume and low competition, and then start thinking about whether you're motivated to build an app for it. And if you're motivated to build an app for it, what it would look like, have a look at the competition. And then generally the App Store, especially the Google Play Store, it's just saturated with apps that bombard you with ads and annoying sort of paywalls and things like that. So a point of difference is if you release an app that's comparable to what's already on there, and it's free and there's no ads on it, it just starts to get some viral growth happening. And then 6 months, 12 months later, you can start optimizing it for revenue.
Greg has a question related, I would say. He says, seems like marketing is a talent of yours. How did you get so good at it? Very complimentary question.
Thank you. That's a good question. It's just been trial and error, just from, I think, trial and error, but also running the service-based business. I got to see what other businesses were doing in similar fields. So for 10, 15 years, I was building websites and software platforms for clients. And I was building platforms for like the local government, for insurance companies, for you name it. I've seen how the inner workings of those businesses sort of operate, and you start to see patterns of what works, what doesn't work. But I think it's mostly to do with mindset. So I think mostly focusing on looking at everything that I do, I look at it more in terms of, will this work? Let's see what happens if I do this, instead of sort of going in with a fixed mindset where I expect I do A, B, C, therefore D will happen. So it's just going in, experimenting, playing around with it. The biggest, because I don't pay for any marketing and I don't promote it, the biggest thing that I do is just release it for free to start off with. If it gains momentum, then start building on it from there. So like I hinted at earlier, I try to release a new app every month. And then in 3 months' time, that app might start to sort of get my attention, get more users on it. So I jump onto it, and then I start thinking about, or I have some feedback from customers, what would they like to see in the app? I start building that in there. I start building features that I would like to have seen in it from the beginning, but didn't have time because of the time restraints. So if an app doesn't really generate much user attention, doesn't get too many downloads, I will just let it sit there. It doesn't cost anything to run it, doesn't cost anything to maintain it. I put the time and the effort in, it just sits there. And sometimes those apps, like 12 months later, will start to all of a sudden pop and get my attention and go to version 2, version 3. So I hope that answers the question. My strategy with marketing is see what works, play around with ideas, have a passion about it, and just run with it.
So you mentioned it takes like 6-12 months to get these apps ready to monetize. What metrics are you looking at to know if an app is like ripe for the harvesting, and how are you optimizing them for revenue if not through ads, if it's a free app?
So because I'm not using any ads, I'm just using the algorithm for the App Store and Google Play. It's targeting those keywords that are high in traffic and lower in competition. So I target those keywords. It can take a month, it can take 6 months, it can take 12 months to start sort of increasing in the rankings. Once it's stabilized, so if I'm targeting a keyword and it jumps up to position 1, I'll wait a few months just to make sure that that's definitely sort of stabilized in the first position, and then I just jump onto it. So I guess from that perspective, my metric to determine whether I build upon it is just the user acquisition side of things. So if it's getting 800 downloads a month, 1,000 downloads a month, and that's pretty consistent, then I know that I can generate around about 500 monthly recurring revenue from that app.
And then do you add ads at that point, or do you add an upsell? How do you make money?
I've tried ads in the past. Ads, so you need a lot of volume and a lot of people using the app and a lot of people coming back to the app over and over and over again in my opinion, for ads to be viable. It's one of those, I always find the app store a really weird business model where your intention is to annoy the customer enough so they upgrade to remove ads. And I don't like that I've tried it in the past. It feels a bit dirty. When I've sold apps, the first thing a buyer will say is like, let's just put as many ads in there as possible. So every time you do something and a full screen ad would pop up, you do this, a full screen ad would pop up. And it frustrates me, but it's a general practice that users are expecting in the app store. So I personally don't like, from the return on investment, I think there's better ways to optimize an app from simply just turning on a paywall. So the app was free in 6 months to 12 months time when it's number one in the app store. I can turn on a paywall that gives people like a 3 or 7 day trial. And then after that, they could pay a monthly or an annual fee. That's the simplest and easiest way to monetize an app. And I've recently just switched on a paywall for an app that I've created that my son helped me create. It's like a little visualization app for toddlers and for babies. So the benefit with that one was you'll see so many parents putting YouTube in front of the kids, and YouTube has ads, the kid wants to touch it and do this. So I just made a simple visualization app and it took off. And I've just recently added a paywall to it. And the paywall it's the exact same app. I added some more usability features and functionality to it when I updated it. But generally now when you download the app, you've got a 3-day trial to test it out. And then after that, the subscription kicks in. So that business model works well with that app, I think. And then, for example, with the Tarot app that I've created, it's if I put a paywall up on that one, I'd kill the growth. So I think it's still in the process of growing. So that one is more the freemium model that I'm going down. The freemium model is that you get feature A, B, C for free, and then you upgrade and you get feature X, Y, Z. So I think it just depends entirely on the app. The second you put a paywall in there, so if you're getting 800 downloads a month and you put a paywall in there, from my calculation, I know that my app could make about up to 500 monthly recurring revenue, but there'll be no more growth. There'll be no more viral. People won't be sharing it as much. Your metrics on the dashboard will drop in terms of user engagement, but the revenue will go up. So there's a bit of a balancing act between monetizing and hurting the growth of the app. And especially if I'm releasing it for free and I'm not paying for marketing. My biggest marketing is the app store itself, but then also people recommending the app and sharing it with friends.
Have you experimented with keeping it free even longer to see if you can grow even larger, or is there a point, like a wall you hit where you know, okay, this is the most we're going to grow and now is the time to monetize?
Usually when I do put a paywall into it, it means that I've hit the first keyword, so there's no more growth that I can see. It's instead of the chart going up, it's been just a few months of going sideways, which generally says to me it's time to monetize it. The sooner I can monetize it, the sooner I can monetize it, the sooner revenue starts getting generated. And then
Mm-hmm.
someone that buys the app wants to see the more revenue they can see, the more consistent revenue, the more valuable it is. So if you have like a year of revenue, a buyer will be more comfortable with the results than, for example, if you've only got 2 weeks of revenue, proven revenue. So the sooner I can get revenue into there, the better. And then it's just that balancing act between user acquisition and monetizing.
And then what did you say the multiple is typically on these apps? Like
The
for an exit?
multiple, so anywhere from 2 to 5. So I've had most of them sell for around about pretty much right in the middle of that. So 2.5, so 2.5 years of revenue. But I've had some apps that sell for up to 5 times the annual revenue.
And I guess the buyer is assuming that they can monetize it better than you in order to make their investment back, or what?
Not necessarily. So I had the last app that I sold, the buyer was my competitor who bought it. So he bought the app and he just shut it down. So I was hitting his app was number 1 in the rankings, and you could see that mine was coming up to overtake it soon. And I'd monetized it and put it up for sale. I had a few interested buyers, but he just threw a large sum of money at it to make it disappear, so it didn't hurt his existing app. And most of the buyers, so I've got a couple of buyers who do add sort of ads into the app to generate more revenue. But what I found is most of my buyers they buy it and they just leave it. They just bank on it as a residual recurring revenue, and you get to have a bit of access to their dashboard, their app store, and their Google Play account when you upload it and get it into their portfolio. And you see that they've bought quite a few apps, and they're not really updating them, they're just accumulating them. And these are good buyers for me because generally they don't know coding. They're just looking at more of a digital asset that generates revenue. And then when they need to update the app or update any of their other apps, they'll often come to me and say, hey, how much will it cost to do X, Y, Z? And there's a bit of a residual sort of income that comes from that as well.
So is there the concept of like digital depreciation? I guess if they're not shipping updates and things for, like if the phone updates and it breaks your app, then their asset just depreciated unless they hire you to fix it, right? So they're holding these things as if it was a house, but there's some differences there.
There's definitely some differences, and you and myself in the industry know that it needs to be updated, and you sort of need to keep it fresh in the algorithm on the App Store and on Google and on SEO. They like to have new content and for it to be fresh. So yeah, I'm not quite sure the long-term strategy, but the short-term strategy or the mid-term strategy seems to be buy these apps, generates passive income, and in the future they could be adding to it. I'm not entirely sure what they do with it from there.
Gotcha. Well, it seems like a pretty good deal to be able to sell it and not have to take any of those risks yourself.
Yeah, and that's the benefit. So because my skill set is really in terms of getting something from 0 to that 500 mark, then my skill set isn't really scaling it beyond there. Then I can sell it, I can cash out, and someone else that wanted to take on that responsibility of scaling it can do so.
Got another question from Greg, which is, how are you ranking, validating your app ideas, and how do you estimate the revenue for a potential idea? As in, like, how do you know how many downloads you're going to get per month when you do win the SEO wars?
It's another good question, and it just comes down to that trial and error again. Well, not necessarily. jumping onto a service like App Figures. So I've got an amazing idea. I don't know if it's going to work, but I can jump onto App Figures to see, are there any keywords that people are searching for this app idea? What sort of volume is being what sort of volume in terms of downloads can I see from the keyword, and what's the competition like? And then another metric I use is just to jump onto the App Store itself and to sort of see what, if I type in those keywords, what comes up, and can I build an app that is comparable to what's already there, or even just 1% better than what's already there. So it doesn't have to be revolutionary. It doesn't have to be in reinventing the wheel. It can just simply be an app that's iteratively better, so just slightly better. And then if the app is selling for $80 a year, if I release a free version, that's going to generate a lot more attention and start to get downloads from the store. So I don't exactly know how many downloads it's going to get unless I look to see what the keyword volume is. And there's a lot of ideas that just, I use the version 1.0 as the validation, part of the validation method. So an idea is validated internally if I can see that there's volume. And then if I build this, how long is it going to take to build the app? If it's going to take 6 months, then I'll abandon it. If it's going to take a few weeks for the first version, then I'll put some time and effort into it, upload it. If it doesn't take off and doesn't generate much in terms of downloads, then I'll abandon it. So it's just that iterative, step-by-step process. So the answer to the question is I don't entirely know how many downloads it'll get until I've put up there and seen myself, but I can make an educated guess along the way.
How are you brainstorming what to build in the first place? Because I look at your portfolio and it's all over the place, right? Astronaut game, positive quotes daily, biorhythm calculator, baby sleep cycle tracker. Like, there's a lot of, these are entirely different ideas. So where are you getting these from?
They're all just part of my journey through life. So we've recently had a baby, so there's a lot of apps in there now that are geared towards ideas that I've had for him. So my partner was using a baby sleep cycle app, and it was something ridiculous, like $120 a year to subscribe to it. She turned around and said, do you think that this is something that you could create? So in a couple of weeks, I built it in public, released it, and it was comparable to what she was using. And that's when I noticed that mums groups share. There's a lot of like the WhatsApp and the message groups that go around. And the second that you get one mum in a mums group using it, they'll share it to the rest of their mums group. They'll share it. And there's a lot of viral growth. So that's when the visualization app, the baby visualization app, came about. My son, we bought him a little book, a high contrast book. And high contrast is basically just really basic black and white images of, they're the first things that a baby sees. And I was reading about these high contrast, what benefits it has for babies. And I noticed there's no apps on the App Store for high contrast shapes. All the apps for babies are like, interact with this, and this is jumping out here, and this is doing this, and that's doing that. So I scaled it right back in terms of it was just purely high contrast shapes. And he was a month or two at the time, and he was like my best beta tester for it. So I got to see what shapes worked, what music worked, and then I released that one. So all the apps are really just part of my journey. The tarot app came about because we ordered something through a shop, and they threw in a pack of tarot cards. And I thought to myself, I'd like to learn tarot. So I started looking on the App Store to see if there was a resource for learning tarot. and there wasn't really. So I started building an app for learning tarot. And then when it comes to things like the positive quotes, that was like all I wanted was an app that on my watch would give me something uplifting throughout the day. So I just made an app that would give me a notification. Those ones are a bit harder to monetize though, because people aren't opening up the app and using the app. It's just coming through as a notification. So yeah. And what you're seeing in my portfolio are the apps that haven't been sold. So they're the ones that sort of just accumulate users over time.
So I was already thinking that's a lot of apps, and that's only the ones that haven't sold. So
yeah.
All right. Got a couple questions from Patrick in the Slack or in the chat, and I'll just go in order. So his first question is, if you were to start over again today, I'm guessing from the moment where you're in debt way over your head, the old business just failed. What's the first thing you're gonna do? What are you gonna invest in first in order to survive and get back on your feet?
I've done this, so I've started from scratch. I've started from lower than low. So some people, when they start their journey, they start off at zero. They build from there. I started off at minus 200,000 and had to pay off debts before I could even get to zero, just to build again. And I've learned this firsthand, and I've been through this process firsthand. And the first thing that I would tell myself back in that journey would be to, it's going to sound cliche, but to invest in yourself. So get new skills, really identify what your passion is, what makes you tick in the morning, what makes you tick throughout the day, what makes you get out of bed to tackle the day. And for me, it's just exploring ideas, creating things, releasing things, experimenting, and then reaping the rewards from it. And that's what woke me up every morning. That's what I found myself passionate about. So when I sort of gave myself a big look in the mirror and assessment of where I wanted the trajectory of my life, it was like I could work a 9 to 5 and I could make a pretty good income with the skills that I have. But I feel like that would be a jail. Like that would be too restrictive. My passion is to sort of create things that I want to create and experiment with the direction that I want to experiment with. And if that was taken away from me, I would be very, very unhappy. So I really lent into that and went down that path of just releasing it for free. Every month I was releasing a new app. I had no intention of it taking off or being a full-time job that I'd be able to do. But I just followed the passion, followed what I love to do. And then everything just slowly, it was like a bulldozer where I just bulldozed everything around me just to focus on what I wanted to do. And then life started to align to allow me to keep doing what I want to do. So I have started again, and starting again, even if it happened tomorrow, I would do a similar thing what I've done in the past, and just focus on what my values are and focus on what direction I wanted to take.
It's very bold, I think. You're in this situation where you're starting over from scratch, and most people probably would have said, okay, like, I'm just going to get a job. I'm just going to like take the obvious route. And you said, no, I think I can do something more than that. And then you did it.
I think some arrogance comes into it. I think every startup founder would be able to identify that burning passion, and that just there's something inside you that makes you believe in yourself a bit more than the average person. So before these businesses become a success, if you talk to people, they'll tell you that it can't happen. After they become a success and you talk to people outside of the startup community, they will dismiss it as luck or there's just something about when you talk to other startup founders, they get that burning desire that and like I said, the arrogance of I can do it. And I mean, at the end of the day, what's the worst that's going to happen? The worst that's going to happen is I'll have a 9 to 5 job. So let's try this path first, and that can always be my backup plan. But that's not something that I wanted to do, and I wouldn't be happy with working in a 9 to 5 job. So focusing on my passion and giving it a shot was the first step before I even went down that path.
We kind of answered already to Patrick's second question here, but I'll reiterate just in case you have something more to add on to it. So he asks, when you began, you woke up being uncomfortable daily. What was it that kept you going? How did you manage that?
Well, I think that, like you said, I've sort of touched a little bit on that already, but the biggest motivator for me is family. So being able to provide for them and being able to put a roof over their head and being able to have some stability. So I grew up and I had a roof over my head and stability. And then when my business failed and things were very chaotic, I looked and thought, this is not the life that I want for my children. I want them to know what stability is, and for them to know that they're safe and that the roof isn't going to be taken, like the roof's not going to disappear. So that's my biggest driving motivator would be to for them to put a roof over their head. And it's a good motivator, because if I just focused on my passions, I could sort of be a bit directionless with regards to building for the sake of building, or exploring ideas that might not have a potential for revenue. But because I've always got that underlying thought in the back of my head that it can all disappear, because I've seen it disappear, it can all disappear, then it keeps me on my toes to make sure that the time that I put into it there is the possibility of revenue at the end of it, and it's not just playing around with ideas aimlessly or direction without direction.
Why did you choose apps in the end? You could have done SaaS or e-commerce or any of a number of other things. What made you decide I'm going to build apps?
It purely started from that lawn mowing app. So if that was a SaaS, I identified that people in the industry who are already using a piece of paper to track their lawn mowing rounds, they're not going to jump onto a website. They're really as low tech as you can get. So the motivator for building an app was to try to transfer my skills of building a SaaS or building web apps or building websites into making apps. So it was purely just in terms of that one specific idea that I had, trying to convert that into something that was really easy to use. And then that opened up my eyes to the App Store, how much marketing you can do through App Store optimization, and then how much of an asset that becomes on its own an app without having to have a back-end server or infrastructure in place. You can literally create a standalone website essentially inside an app, release it to the App Store, and it doesn't cost you anything to maintain it or run it after that. So it was purely just in terms of the target market at the time for that specific idea that I had. And then that opened up my eyes to user acquisition and the low cost and low entry point of getting apps out there.
Bopa has a question here in the chat that I think a lot of people will be interested in. He asks, how many apps have you built so far, and what percentage of those were you able to sell?
That's a good question, because like you said, you don't get to see the apps that are sold because they disappear out of my app store. I think I've built 30 apps, and from last calculation, I think around about 8 of them have sold. So whatever percentage that is, like nearly 1/3 of the apps have sold. And then there's a couple more apps that I'm working on at the moment that will be geared up to sell as well. So I think it's, if I was to make an educated guess, around about 1 in 3 apps I exit, probably 1 in 3 apps fail, and then 1 in 3 apps I'm sort of building as a pipeline for the future.
Cool. When it comes time to sell, how are you finding the buyer?
They contacted me to begin with. So when I had that real big viral hit right at the beginning, I had a lot of buyers contacting me. So I was able to build up a contact list of buyers who were interested in buying apps. Whenever I'm getting ready to sell an app, I'll float it with them and say, hey, this is where this is at. I'll share the dashboard, the Google Play and the App Store dashboard with them, and they'll have a look over the stats, and sometimes they will be interested. Other times they'll say they'll give it a miss. If I'm really motivated to sell an app, I'll start sort of reaching out to services like Flipper, and I've also listed on Micro Acquire as well. So they're good opportunities there as well to sort of find buyers. But also I'm very open, and I talk a lot on Twitter about selling apps. So that automatically just attracts people in my DMs now who say, what apps do you have for sale? And that also generates interest from buyers to contact me as well. But the most valuable thing that I've got is a contact of buyers who are motivated to buy these apps. They buy apps just to sit on it for a portfolio. So the metric is basically what value can you provide to the buyer, and I can show them what they're looking for, which is, this is the nice consistent revenue that it generates. Would you like to buy it?
Sounds like that contact list itself could be a valuable business if you became like an app broker or something.
Yeah, I've had there's a couple of app developers that have reached out to me to say, hey, do you know a buyer for my app? And I've contacted them to buyers that I think would work well, because there's two sides of the coin. I'm building apps, and there's people out there that want to buy apps that are built. So it's just bringing them together.
So once you find somebody who is interested, what does that negotiation look like? Is there a lot of back and forth, or is it, this is the industry standard? How's it gone so far?
It depends on the buyer. So if I've dealt with them in the past, the more history you have with a buyer, the easier it becomes for the sale to happen. Sometimes, so if I contact a buyer that I've used before, sometimes I can say, would you like to buy this app? And then the next day the funds will be in my account and the app will be in their account. So we've already done the due diligence, and we've already built a good relationship in the past. They know how I work. I know how they work. There's a lot of trust there. That's the best case scenario, because the liquidity of the app is it's amazing. Other times there is a lot of back and forth. So what I found is just to be 100% transparent. And because I'm building in public and everything is very transparent on Twitter, a buyer can look through and see that this is not just an app that's popped out of nowhere. This is the progression. This is the journey that the app has been on to get to where it's at. So that builds a lot of credibility straight off the bat there. So yeah, the due diligence process, I think, in my opinion, is just be 100%. I just be 100% transparent, show them everything that they want to see, the good, the bad, everything in between. And then it's up to them whether they wanted to buy the app or not.
Alejandro asks, after having built many successful apps, have you thought or considered buying apps from others for yourself and growing them instead of building them from scratch?
That's a good question, and I think it jumps on what I was talking about earlier which is that I'm really good at getting something from 0 to 500, but 500 plus, that I don't necessarily have that skill set. So I focus on my skill set, which is it costs me nothing to build the app, it costs me nothing to release the app, it costs me nothing to market the app. I can create value from nothing to 500 per month. But if an app is already established, I probably would struggle a bit with growing it a bit further. Or that's a skill set that I don't necessarily have. My skill set is building it from scratch.
You're kind of an expert now at selling apps. I doubt there's very many people at all that have sold more apps than you at this point, just because it's going to be like a Pareto principle thing, you know, like the majority of people that build an app never sell it at all. The majority who do maybe sell one. And here you've sold 8 already, with probably several more to be sold. So I guess where's the info product, right? You've got this audience now on Twitter and stuff. Have you thought about selling a course or something in order to make money from the knowledge that you've built over time?
The thoughts come to my mind, and when I first started to get attention on Twitter and it was building momentum, I thought when I reach 10,000 followers, I'm going to release a course. And I think it's every single journey that every person on Twitter sort of goes through. But what I found was if it's executed poorly, I've seen some of the accounts that I was looking up to and the accounts that I was watching, I see them building in public. They reach a certain point and then they lock away all their content into a paywall almost. So I've been hesitant to sort of go down that path because I think it changes my dynamic of what my strategy would be on Twitter. So on Twitter, it's just share my knowledge and learn from others what's working, share myself what's working, and grow from there. I think if I was to go down the path this early in the game of creating an info product, I think subconsciously in my head, my strategy on Twitter would change dramatically, because I wouldn't want to go down that path of being a salesman on Twitter. At the moment, there's not too much overlap with my apps, with my audience, except for I've started to create a few Twitter tools. But otherwise, a lot of my apps, there's no overlap unless you've got a new baby or you're into tarot or something like that. So I'm not selling on Twitter. I'm just helping and sharing, and it's more fun that way. I'm not someone that likes to sort of oversell.
Well, we've got an exception to that now, though, right? With top followers.
Yeah. In terms of, what do you mean? In terms of the overlap? In terms of
like overlap, yeah. Because that one is targeted at like indie makers and things, people who are trying to grow their Twitter.
Yeah. So I think when it comes to like the follow tracker, which I've created, and that was just purely to track my metrics on Twitter, and then I released it as the app, and then the top followers part of it was the most interesting part. So I'd spun that into its own sort of website. And my strategy with that one was going to be a little bit different than apps that I've created in the past. So apps that I've created in the past were built to sell in the end. These types of apps would be more in terms of a long-term sort of strategy or growth to it. I could envision that if I keep building all these little Twitter tools, all these little engagement tools, that in the future it could be one big product. But it's still early days, and I am hesitant to monetize those apps, because if Elon decides tomorrow that the API is going to cost $42,000, I don't want to be left with a whole bunch of refunds and a whole bunch of people angry at me. So at the moment, it's just sort of, it's a hobby that's getting attention, and then I'll keep revisiting it as my interest sort of peaks with it.
So you're kind of a phoenix, right? You built a business, crashed and burned, you built back up. What's different about Adam the entrepreneur today versus Adam the entrepreneur last go around?
Last go around. That's a really interesting question. I think I touched on the arrogance side of things. So arrogance is a really good thing to have building businesses and having some belief in you. But last time around, my arrogance and I thought I was right. I thought I was doing everything right and no one could tell me anything different. I didn't listen to other people, and I was on my own path because it was working for so long, and because I thought, I've got this sorted. I know what I'm doing. I wasn't listening to other people in the industry, and I wasn't listening to friends and family. And I was kind of selfish in that respect. So I think the biggest difference between then and now would be just purely a mindset shift. So back then I was focused on a lot of the material side of things. So I had nice cars, nice house, everything was very showy. There was that arrogant side to my life, but it never really filled, all that success never really filled what I was about, or I always felt a bit empty inside, even though I thought if I strive to get this car, or I strive to get this revenue, that I'll be happy, and that's what'll be the thing that'll make me finally feel happy about myself. And I kept finding every time you reach a milestone, the next milestone is there. You always want to do the next thing. You always want to do the next thing. So I found myself in that cycle of just following the wrong direction. And I think that wrong direction was just arrogance and following the money. So now my biggest difference if I looked at myself now versus then, my biggest difference is that I'm following my passion and also helping others along the way. So to sort of summarize that thought process, because I haven't really thought about that in the past, it is my thought process in the past was, I'll reach the top. I don't care about anyone else. Now my thought process is, I'll reach wherever I'm going, but it's much more fun if you bring everyone along with you. So that analogy of the tide brings all the boats up. Can't remember what the exact saying is, but that analogy, that it's a lot more fun, a lot more fulfilling for me when you get to share your successes, and then also get to see your influence that you have on others and their success as well. So that's been the biggest change for me from the last cycle to this cycle.
Feels like a really good note to end on. In that case, we're kind of at time here, and I want to cut it right there at, I think, a very poignant realization. It's really cool to see how you've really gone through like a hero's journey of your own. Like, you can make a movie out of it. To see someone succeed, it's inspiring, right? But to see someone fail really hard and then succeed again, to me at least, inspires me a lot more. So thanks for coming on and sharing your story with us and letting us pick your brain a bit about how you found version 2 of success.
Thanks for inviting me along, Anthony. This is the first time I've done anything like this, and it's it's been quite fun.
I've recorded this thing. I'll make it available to you guys afterwards in the Slack. Adam, thank you so much, and I hope we can stay connected out there in cyberspace, if not in meat space.
Thanks, and thank you to everyone that joined in. I didn't get to see everyone's faces. I got to see a couple of faces.
Speaking of faces, if we have a sec, if you guys would like to be in the, hey, people show up to these things and they're fun screenshot, take a second, turn your camera on. We'll have a big happy family photo. I'll give you guys a second. All right, big smiles. I'll do one more because we almost missed Alejandro. All right, 3, 2, 1. Excellent. Thank you guys so much. Yes, Adam, parting words. I cut you off.
I'm not sure what the parting words were, but I was just thinking just now, it was because this is the first time I've done anything like this. It was kind of easier to do it with all of the anonymous looking avatars. So it's it's a bit out of my comfort zone, but it's I like to share my knowledge and like to help others. So it's a direction that I think I need to sort of embrace a bit more.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad that we were your first. That's flattering. All right. Thanks, everybody, for coming. We'll see you at the next one. There's a mastermind tomorrow, virtual as well. Adam, you're welcome to join us. I can send you the link in Twitter DM. And if you happen to be in New York City, anybody, there is a IRL meetup in Manhattan tomorrow afternoon. So all the deets for that is in Slack, or hit me up in Twitter, wherever we're connected, and I'll send you links for those. See you at the next one.
Thanks for that. See ya.
Bye, everybody.